Let me tell you something. When the world looks at India right now, they ain't seeing the same country they used to see 20, 30 years ago. Back then, India was still treated like the underdog. Nations, especially America, thought they could boss India around with tariffs, sanctions, pressure, and deals that only benefited them. But today that script is flipped, and the one doing the flipping, that's India. America just got forced to cut tariffs, and not because they suddenly felt generous, not because they suddenly woke up one morning with a new sense of fairness. No, it's because India, backed by the weight of Russia and China standing behind Modi, made it absolutely clear you play by our terms, or you don't play at all. You got to understand something about power. It doesn't get handed to you, you take it. And that's exactly what India has done. Think about it. For decades, the U.S. used tariffs like a weapon. Any country that tried to rise up, boom, here comes the tariffs. They say it's just economics, but really it's about control. But now the tables turn. Now America's the one being told, cut those tariffs because India's not bowing to you anymore. And you know what's even crazier? America actually did it. That right there shows you the shift we're living through. Now, people might ask, how did India pull this off? How does a country that was once seen as just an outsourcing hub suddenly have the might to make America back off? Let me break it down. First, India has built its economy brick by brick, step by step. They went from struggling with shortages to being the fastest growing major economy in the world. But here's the real kicker. India didn't do it by begging for favors. They built industries, developed technology, and created a market so massive that nobody can afford to ignore it. You got over 1 billion people, a young population, tech talent that's unmatched, and a government that decided it's time to stop being polite and start being powerful. Second, alliances, and this is where it gets real interesting. See, America used to play this game where they divide and conquer, pit countries against each other, so nobody could rise too high. But what's happening now? India's got Russia in one corner, China in another, and suddenly that old game don't work anymore. Russia and India have had ties for decades. Defense, energy, trade, you name it. China might be a rival in some ways, but when it comes to pushing back on American dominance, India knows how to use that leverage. And when Modi steps up to the global stage, he's not walking alone. He's got backup. You know what America respects? Strength. That's the only language they truly understand. And India finally started speaking it fluently. When America tried to squeeze India with tariffs, India hit right back with their own. They said, oh, you want to raise prices on our goods? Fine, we'll raise them on yours too. And guess what? American businesses started feeling that pain. See, tariffs ain't just numbers on paper. They affect real industries, tech, agriculture, manufacturing. Suddenly, U.S. companies are knocking on Washington's door saying, y'all fix this. We can't afford to lose India's market. That's when America realized this ain't a country you can just push around anymore. And here's the part I love. India didn't just win with threats, they won with options. That's the power of having choices. For years, America acted like they were India's only door to the global market. But Modi made sure that door wasn't the only one. Oil from Russia, trade with China, partnerships with Europe, investments from the Middle East. All these doors opened up. So when America tried to slam their door shut, India just shrugged and said, we'll walk through another one. That's checkmate right there. Now let's be real, this moment is bigger than just tariffs. It's symbolic. It's about respect. India forced America to admit, without even saying the words, that they can't dictate the rules anymore. That's huge. Because respect in geopolitics doesn't come from asking nicely. It comes from showing you can stand tall and deliver consequences when someone tries to play you. Think about the global stage right now. You got America still trying to hold on to that superpower image. You got China flexing with its economy. You got Russia trying to show it's still a force despite sanctions. And then you got India quietly but powerfully rising, saying, we don't need to be in your shadow. We'll write our own playbook. And now the whole world has to deal with that reality. What makes this even more powerful is the timing. The global economy is shaky. Supply chains are fragile. Energy markets are unstable. And in the middle of that storm, India stands as one of the only countries with growth, stability, and the potential to become the manufacturing hub of the world. That means if you're America, you can't afford to make India your enemy. You can't afford to cut India out. You need them more than they need you. And when the balance flips like that, oh, the whole relationship changes. Let's not forget the man steering this ship, Modi. Whether you agree with his politics or not, you got to respect the fact that he understands leverage. He knows how to turn India's strengths into bargaining chips. He knows how to project confidence on the world stage. And with Russia and China backing him, he walks into every negotiation with extra muscle behind him. That ain't just leadership, that's strategy. Picture it like a poker table. America's been the big player for decades, throwing chips around like nobody could challenge them. But India just sat down at the table with a stack so high, America had to sit up straight. And here's the best part. India ain't bluffing. They've got real cards in hand: energy security, military partnerships, a massive consumer market, and global allies ready to deal. That's why America folded on tariffs. They had no choice. And let's talk about those allies for a minute. Russia has been India's defense partner for decades. Even when America tried to pressure India to stop buying Russian oil, India said no. Why? Because cheap oil from Russia keeps India's economy moving. And guess what happened? Western sanctions didn't break Russia, but they gave India an opportunity to buy energy at a discount and strengthen their position. That's called turning somebody else's problem into your advantage. Then there's China. Now, people like to say India and China are rivals, and they are no doubt. Border tensions are real, competition is fierce. But when it comes to breaking America's monopoly on power, China knows India's role is crucial. And India knows that playing its cards right with China keeps America guessing. That's the genius of strategy. You don't have to be friends, you just have to be smart. America thought it could use tariffs as a stick to control India. Instead, it ended up proving India's strength. Because when the stick doesn't scare you anymore, you realize you're not the one being disciplined. You're the one holding the power. And that's what India just showed the whole world. Now let's think about what this means for the average person in India. See, geopolitics can feel far away, like it's just about leaders and governments. But when tariffs get cut, that means Indian goods can move easier into American markets. That means more business for Indian companies, more jobs, more income, more growth. It trickles down. It's not just about pride on the world stage. It's about prosperity at home. And that's the real victory. The West doesn't like to admit it, but India is rewriting the rules of global trade. They're showing that you don't have to bow down to one superpower. You can create balance by building strong relationships with multiple players. That's what a true independent nation looks like. And let me tell you, the psychology of this shift is massive. For years, America assumed India needed them more than they needed India. But now America is learning a new lesson. Dependency runs both ways. And when the power balance changes, so does the respect. You can already see it in how American leaders talk about India now. More cautious, more respectful, more eager to cooperate instead of dictate. That's not kindness, that's recognition of power. This is why I keep saying, The rise of India isn't just about economics. It's about confidence. It's about a country that knows its worth and refuses to settle for less. That's what forced America's hand. Because when you know your value, you can walk into any room, any deal, any negotiation, and make others see it too. And the story ain't over. Cutting tariffs is just one chapter. But it sends a message louder than any speech. India is here to stay, here to grow, and here to demand respect. America, Russia, China, they all know it now. The game has changed, and India is the one holding the pen that writes the new rules. The New World Order is India at the center, not at the sidelines. And I need you to understand how big that is, because for decades, India was always invited into the room, but never given the main seat at the table. India was treated like a supporting actor in a global movie where the lead roles were always America, Russia, or China. India had to clap for others not along and wait for permission to speak. But now that old script is gone, that storyline is dead, because India forced the world to look at it not as an extra in someone else's show, but as the main character in its own story. And you don't get to the center of the world order by accident. It doesn't just happen because the world feels generous. You get there because you fight for it, you prove your worth, and you refuse to stay in the shadows. That's what India has been doing over the last few decades. Slowly at first, quietly, without a lot of fanfare. But now the results are undeniable. The country that was once seen as just a cheap labor hub, just a market for foreign companies, is now setting terms and calling shots. See, the center of power has always shifted throughout history. It used to be Europe. Then it moved to America. Now, in our lifetime, we are watching that center tilt toward Asia. But out of all the Asian nations, it's India that's becoming the balancing point. Because here's the truth, the U.S. can't control the future without India. Russia can't maneuver global strategy without India. And even China knows it can't dominate without India in the equation. That's why India is at the center. It's not about being the loudest. It's about being the one everyone has to consider before making a move. Now let's talk about why this shift is happening. First, numbers don't lie. India is the world's largest democracy, and it's about to be the biggest population on earth. That means a consumer market so massive that no corporation, no government, no economic powerhouse can ignore it. When you've got 1 billion people moving into the middle class, buying cars, smartphones, homes, energy, you're not a secondary player. You're the game itself. America knows it. Europe knows it. Even the Middle East knows it. That's why they're all lining up to sign deals and shake hands with India. Second, India ain't just a market anymore. It's a creator. You look at technology. India is producing the engineers, the coders, the innovators that Silicon Valley itself depends on. You look at space. India launched missions at a fraction of the cost, landing near the moon's south pole before countries with bigger budgets could even dream of it. You look at defense. India isn't just buying weapons, it's making them, and in some cases, making them better than the countries that once sold them. That right there is why the world has to treat India differently. You can't sideline a country that brings real value to the table. Third, India learned the hardest lesson of global politics. Options equal power. When you have no options, you beg. When you have many options, you negotiate. And right now, India has options everywhere. Need oil? Russia's got it covered at a discount. Need technology? The West is willing to sell. Need infrastructure investment? China wants in. Need energy and funds? The Middle East is ready to pour billions. That means no single country can twist India's arm anymore. If one door closes, 10 others open. And that's exactly how you move from the sidelines to the center. But what really seals India's place in the middle of the New World Order is respect, earned respect. Because nobody hands you respect, You demand it by showing results. And India has results to show. Military strength that makes even superpowers think twice. Economic growth that outpaces almost everyone else. Cultural influence that spreads across the globe through movies, music, yoga, and spirituality. Political leadership that doesn't back down, whether it's in the UN, in trade talks, or in defense negotiations. Respect comes when the world realizes you're not a country they can dictate to. You're a country they need to cooperate with. And you can see this respect playing out in real time. America used to lecture India about who to buy oil from, who to trade with, what positions to take. But when India kept buying Russian oil despite all the sanctions, America had to swallow its pride. Why? Because punishing India would hurt America more than India. That's the center right there. That's the leverage. You can't punish the center without shaking the whole system, and nobody's willing to take that risk. Russia, on the other hand, sees India as its anchor in Asia. While the West tries to squeeze Moscow, Russia leans on India to keep trade alive, to keep partnerships steady. China, even though it competes fiercely with India, still knows that without India's participation, its dream of rewriting the global order falls flat. That's why China shows up to Beria summits with India at the table, because ignoring India is no longer an option. Let me paint you a picture. Imagine the world order as a wheel. For years, America was the hub in the middle, and everybody else was just a spoke connected to it. If you wanted to move, you had to go through America. But now that wheel has shifted. India is becoming that hub. And what does that mean? It means if America wants influence, it needs India. If Russia wants influence, it needs India. If China wants influence, it still needs India. That's the power of the center. Everything revolves around you. And this didn't happen overnight. It took decades of building, struggling, falling, and rising again. It took leadership that believed in India's potential. It took people who refused to settle for less, who pushed boundaries in science and business and politics. That's why India is where it is today. At the heart of global conversations, at the crossroads of power. Let's not forget how symbolic this moment really is. For centuries, India was colonized, exploited, dismissed. The British used it as their jewel. The West used it as a market, but nobody treated it as equal. Now, in the New World Order, those same nations that once saw India as a follower are coming to it as a partner. That's history rewriting itself right in front of our eyes. The colonized has become the central. The overlooked has become the overlap. The ignored has become the indispensable. Now, some folks out there still think America will always run the show, that India's rise is just temporary. But those folks aren't paying attention, because the numbers, the politics, the economics all point in one direction. India is not moving back to the sidelines. Every year, its economy grows stronger. Its global influence spreads wider. Its military becomes more advanced and its people more confident. You can't reverse that momentum. It's like a train that's already left the station. The world can either get on board or get left behind. This also means India is reshaping alliances. Old groups like the G7 don't hold the same weight unless India is part of the conversation. BRICS is rising, and who's at the heart of it? India. The Quad with America. Japan and Australia doesn't function unless India's in. Even climate talks, energy deals, global health plans, nothing gets done without India at the table. That's what happens when you're in the center. People can't just talk about you, they have to talk with you. And you know what really seals this transformation? Confidence. India carries itself differently now. It doesn't beg for loans from the IMF. It offers aid to others. It doesn't wait to be invited. It creates platforms of its own. It doesn't just react to global crises. It shapes the solutions. That confidence comes from knowing your worth, from seeing the results of decades of hard work, And from realizing that you are not who others told you you were, you are much bigger, much stronger, much more essential.